It's good to be back, and I have to admit I'm not used to doing this on a weekly basis since I was a head coach a few years ago. So you guys, I'm sure, will put me on the spot and make sure I've got some good quality material for you today. The good news is that any weekend in college football is always chock full of interesting observations. It's like a classic Seinfeld episode. There's always multiple storylines going on. And these first 2 weeks, you could certainly argue that special teams has played a huge role, whether it be in our own game or so many other games. You guys were asking me some questions about Nebraska last week. And obviously, Florida State LSU had played a huge role in the game, and a number of others across the country so far this season. What I brought along with me today that I thought you might find interesting is a copy of our depth chart. And so you can see there's dozens of names on here. There's all these different color codes, and they all mean different things. And almost every guy that dressed for the game is on there in multiple spots in some way, shape, or form. It might be just the hands team at the end of the game. But on the flip side of this depth chart is what we call our game day eyes, okay? And that's an important part of what we do, because every coach who's involved in special teams during the week also has responsibilities on game day to be watching certain things on each play. And I'll tell you a true story that you might get a little chuckle out of. So going back to the 2020 season and COVID, we were all going through unknown times day to day. This depth chart was changing daily based on guys getting tested 3 times a week. We didn't know who was going to play in the game, what coaches might not be able to coach in the game. So going into that season, I decided to make a new column on the Game Day Eyes, which I called Emergency Unit Leader. And so if I got sick and was told that I couldn't coach in the game, then a coach was going to be ready to coach each of the special teams units. And we thought that that was a good fail-safe if I couldn't get on a plane on a Friday or something, or somebody else couldn't, and so forth. So last week, when we were getting ready to play Georgia State, and I was going over the Game Day Eyes with this staff, which obviously includes some new coaches, I told them the backstory of the emergency unit leader, and how I just decided to keep that going since the 2020 season. And this is not made up. I told them, I said, so if I have a heart attack on Saturday night, or if I decide to drop the mic and walk out of Willie B after a big night, you guys know who's in charge, coach your unit, and off we go. So I think there was probably an argument at different times in the game for either, pulling a Fred Sanford and being ready to have a heart attack, or saying this night's going pretty well. This might be a high note kind of day. But that's coaching in a nutshell. And been doing this for 30 years now. Half of that as a head coach and half of that as an assistant coach. And so that's, it's probably upwards of 350 games right now. And those 3.5 hours are intense, and you're constantly going. It's mentally taxing. It's physically taxing. You're running up and down the sideline, running back and forth to the benches. Who's in the game? Who's out of the game? What changes need to be made? Multiple adjustments going on, and you're coaching right up till the very end, because you might need to get the hands team out there, and all of a sudden, somebody's kind of mentally shut it down and said, this thing's under control, but they got to go out and play a play with 2 minutes left in the game. So it takes its toll on you. But what I really believe is that you coach hard and you give it everything you have, or don't do it. And, that's the great thing about working for Shane Beamer. That's how he approaches it. The year I spent with Mike Norvell, I thoroughly enjoyed working with Mike because he was very much the same way. It's like this game and these players and the people you work with, they deserve your very best. And so none of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes, but you have to be at your best all the time. And along with that, week to week, you just never know. And so last week played out well for us in certain ways on special teams, but no two games are alike. Matchups are different every week. The weather is different every week. Injuries are different. Momentum's different. Luck is different. So I've been doing this long enough to know that you never get too high, you never get too low. You coach hard, but you stay even-keeled, and you enjoy a win, and then you get ready to move on because you realize that each game is its own entity, and there are no guarantees that what you did a week ago is going to dictate anything the following week. A little history nugget for you. Eisenhower wrote a note and put it in his pocket the night before D-Day, and basically the note said that it was his responsibility, and the failure of the operation rested solely with him. And that's pretty humbling thought right there when you think about the success of that operation and how it impacted history. But I think that's really how you have to approach coaching. Now, that being said, I did take note of the pair of boxer shorts I was wearing on Saturday night, and I will make sure that those are packed for this trip. So, and maybe the week after too. So, but with that said, I'll open it up for whatever questions you have. Big challenge this week for sure.
Pete, you said you remained even-keeled, so you didn't come in Sunday and ask for maybe a raise or better parking space, something like that.
No, sir.
How did you talk to your kids? Obviously, it's a huge night, and you've probably been in it long enough to know that all these things will probably not happen again in one single game, but you want to keep the kids excited. How did you approach that the next day when you had them?
Yeah, I thought in a lot of ways it was a great win because it was a humbling win. There was enough to walk away from to say, yes, we did some good things, but we can do so much more. And there was plenty to coach on, plenty to improve upon. It was by no means a perfect night in any way, shape, or form. And the other part is that it's about complementary football. So I give a lot of credit to the defense because they were able to get some stops and allow our punt pressure unit to go out there on the field and make some plays in that game that were game-changing plays. If they're driving and they're getting into positive territory and four-down territory and all that, then we're not getting an opportunity to go out there and make those plays. So I think a good team plays complementary football. There are going to be weeks where we don't generate explosive plays on special teams, but hopefully do enough to not hurt us, to not be on the negative side, and maybe another phase really steps up and has an exceptional day. But when all three phases are contributing, and different games are going to play out in different ways, but ideally that's what you want.
Pete, have you gotten a chance to talk to Coach Norvell after that game?
We texted back and forth.
Yeah.
But when I got home late that night and turned it on towards the end, and Jen and I were sitting there, we know how important special teams is to Mike. And so there was no question in my mind that those guys were going to be ready. And if who they were playing was going to give them an opportunity to make plays in that phase, they would. And a lot of it sometimes is just by doing the right things. It's not by doing anything exceptional other than playing with effort and sometimes letting the opponent screw it up, right? And so I was not surprised to see Florida State being ready to make some of those plays, just knowing that the amount of time, effort, energy that they put into special teams is very similar to what we do here.
I guess Coach Beamer was talking yesterday about having a good punt block, punt pressure unit helps the return game as well in terms of complementary football. How can a good return game because you're so good at blocking punts help set the offense up for success with better field position or a little bit more momentum?
Sure. Well, that was something that probably didn't get the credit it deserved the other night from a special team standpoint, was that we had one pretty good long return that was close to going, and a couple others where we gained some decent yards. And when you bring a lot of pressure, people are going to be very conscientious about blocking you. And when they're blocking you, they're not covering down the field, at least not yet. And that's going to create some more space for the return game. So even within the unit itself, it provides good complementary football. And yes, if you can gain 10 yards on a return, that might not seem like a big deal, but that might change completely the offensive coordinator's mindset because of where that drive is starting in terms of what types of plays that he can run. So everything matters. That's one thing I've learned doing this a long time, that everything matters. And I'm sure there are times, whether it be our assistant coaches or our players, probably look at me and say that I'm, off the charts anal about some stuff. But there's a reason, because, you don't get reps back and you don't get time back. And every second that you have is an opportunity to get better. And that stuff definitely pays off on Saturday afternoons and Saturday nights.
Okay, good. Shane told us that the fake field goal that you guys started off with was pre-planned before you guys ever got on the field. Can you take us through just kind of the thought process going into that, and then also what that moment was like on the sideline watching the call play out?
Sure. Well, he's absolutely right that we talk about things a lot going into Saturday. He obviously has to feel good about those high-risk type of plays and when to call them and if to call them. The great thing is that we know, that he grew up around his dad and also has a special teams background himself, so he has an appreciation for those things. And I'd like to think that I've earned his trust, that when I present something, that an opportunity may be there for us, that he knows it's well thought out and not just something that I dreamed up in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. So we went into that game feeling pretty good that opportunity might be there, and that we wanted to get it called. And to his credit, he had wrapped his arms around the idea that we could do it if and when it presented itself. So I was glad we called it. I was proud of Hunter Rogers and how he executed it, and some little things. We work ball security with our specialists, believe it or not. And if you saw Hunter lower his pads and tuck the ball and keep it high and tight, and that was their starting inside linebacker that tackled him. And if he runs through there with high pads and gets knocked back, it's 1st and 10 Georgia State. But the fact that he hit the afterburners and ran behind his pads and accelerated his feet and got his pads down and delivered a blow to that linebacker, that's what got us that first down and eventually that first score. So again, it's a game of detail and fundamentals and techniques, and those things apply to every guy on the roster.
With Kai, did you actually anticipate him, especially when the injury happened, being able to recover quickly enough to be able to punt the other night? And how does he go from where he was with that foot injury to being able to punt as well as he did, as quick as he did?
So anytime there's an injury, I think that's where relationships with your players are important, because everybody is going to handle themselves a little bit differently emotionally and mentally as much as physically. Somebody might go through the exact same rehab for the exact same injury, and one guy might be ready 2 weeks earlier than somebody else. Some of it has to do with what position you play and what the demands of that position are, but some of it definitely has to do with the guy and how you handle all of that emotionally. Kai is a very even-keeled guy. I mean, he is just a regular guy. He's an athlete. He's a specialist, but he's not a specialist. I mean, he's a guy that, you want to meet up with at some restaurant and have an adult beverage with 10 years from now and tell stories. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of guy he is. So when this all happened, in my mind, I knew I wasn't going to have to push him because he's really, really, really self-motivated. He's had the 2 summers we've been here. You asked Luke Day and his staff, and Kai Kroger's effort in the summer and his productivity in the summer and the amount of things he did well in the summers training with our team is in the top 2-3% of our team, both summers. So when he had this injury, I knew he was going to take care of business. And then it was just going to be a question of, would he be ready? And I give a lot of credit to our other guys, to Alex and William, and they all had themselves ready to play in this game if he couldn't go. And then when we decided he was going to play, they were great team players, and there was no hemming and hawing that, well, I've done this all preseason, and now Kai's back the week of the game, and you're putting him back in there. Those guys understand their role as well. So, but to say that he was going to go out and have the kind of night he had, it was impressive. And I'll admit, I was giving him a little hard time after the first 2 punts. I was giving him a hard time on the sideline that he was a little bit rusty and so forth. And then he turned around and obviously had a huge second half of the game.
Mitch Jeter told us after the game Saturday that you told him he won the job at starting kicker on Friday. I guess, how did that conversation kind of go, and what's it like as a special teams coach watching a true freshman hit 250-plus yarders in his first game?
Well, I consider Mitch to be, I guess, a junior, and I know it's all confusing now with the extra year of eligibility, but you're right. He's a first-year kicker in terms of he's been the kickoff guy, but he hasn't kicked field goals in games. So there was definitely some, all right, this is your shot, and go do it, and he responded in a big way. No, but our guys were very good about understanding 2 things. One is that competition's ongoing, and there really wasn't a need to make some big announcement a week or 2 weeks ahead of the first game who the kicker was going to be. It's not like a center working with the guards and the tackles on the offensive line where, if you had a different kicker, it's going to affect calls and things like that. So there really wasn't a rush to do that from my standpoint. And the second thing is that, in our room, we have a lot of very candid, open conversations about things. Who's going on what day, who's taking what reps, why, this guy's doing well, this guy's got to step it up. So I think that kind of honesty and candor, is appreciated by the guys. And then they also understood that we didn't want to tell the world who our kicker was going to be until we had to going into the game. And so a little bit of intrigue going into the first game is not a bad thing, and I think it played out very well. And I give Mitch a lot of credit for stepping up and banging 2 long kicks when we really needed them.
So kind of off of that, obviously special teams got a lot of praise last game. Do you feel, in a sense, not in your own way, but our fans, have they created kind of a higher standard going into this upcoming game? Like, do you believe there's a little bit more pressure just because everybody Gamecocks fans have basically just, lifted them up spirits-wise? Do you think they're going to go into it with a high expectation?
No is not the answer you want to hear, but that's the answer I'm going to give you, and here's why. First of all, nobody puts as much pressure on themselves to do a good job as I do. I tell the guys all the time, my job is to worry. Your job is to go play. All right? My job's to prepare you and worry about the what-ifs. Your job is to go make full-speed decisions with great effort and the technique that we've taught you and apply it on game day, and everything will be just fine. I love the fact that we are building something here and that everybody involved in our program, because I believe very much like Shane that this is a very inclusive, not exclusive program. We want everybody who wants to be a part of this thing, to feel like they're a part of this thing. So we obviously have a head coach who's very easy to get to know and very approachable, and I'd like to think I'm very much the same way. And so if we are building something here that is taking on a life of its own, like Coach Beamer did at Virginia Tech for all those years, then that's awesome. And that makes it all that much more exciting for me to come to work every day, for our staff to be involved with this. And not that I have a lot of time to read a lot of quotes from our players, but our players are starting to really get excited about this stuff. When you have freshmen coming in and they're talking about it, and you have fifth-year seniors who may not even be on it who are talking about it, it's starting to take root, right? And that's what we want. So that doesn't mean that there's not going to be bad moments. That doesn't mean that there's still not going to be highs and lows. Certainly, every week is not going to be like last week. But we are adding value to the program, and that's what we want to be doing.
Pete, do you anticipate Kai returning as holder this week?
Well, we'll see where he's at. You know, I don't want to push things along. I don't want to get greedy. We know he's an exceptional holder, but he's not 100% yet. So we'll just have to take that day by day and see where that plays out to.
Also, I guess one of the popular lines is like, well, you know, Arkansas will be ready for any fake plays on special teams, but can you really be ready considering how many different things that you guys can do? Would it ever influence your way of thinking, knowing that you guys had such a successful week, and say, well, doesn't matter if they're ready or not?
You know, they're very well coached on special teams. They play with a tremendous amount of effort. I think I've told you guys before, I certainly share with our team all the time, watch the last PAT field goal of a game and how hard their PAT field goal block unit goes, and that'll tell you a lot about a football team. Watch the last kickoff of a game, maybe when they're up 28 points, and how hard the guys are covering. That'll tell you a lot about a football team. And I will tell you this is a tough, rugged, hardworking, high-effort football team that we're playing, and they've got excellent coaches. So they will be well prepared, and you know, there's risk reward to everything you do. And I know we were talking about that last week following the week 0 games and some of the things that played out on special teams. So every play is its own entity, every week is its own entity, and you never quite know what the future might hold.
You made mention of it earlier, and Shane mentioned it a couple of times as well, that, you know, special teams was far from perfect, that there was a lot to clean up. Can you give us maybe a couple of examples for us folks who aren't necessarily able to pick those things out?
Sure. Well, the most obvious one was the bad snap on the extra point. And Matt's an experienced player, a veteran player, and so along with that come high expectations for consistency and so forth. So we need to get that cleaned up for sure. And you know, we talked about Hunter Rogers on the fake field goal. I was proud of him and how he stepped in there and snapped the remainder of that game, and that was good to see. There are a lot of other, you know, little technique things. One thing I tell our guys is, you know, games play out different ways, and so being able to take a technique and perhaps apply it in a different way over the course of the game based on an adjustment that we need to make. You know, there's an art to that. You almost have to, you know, erase some things that maybe you've been told on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and now hit the reset button and say, okay, but he wants me to do this way if this situation occurs again. And there's an art to that. There's an experience that comes with that. The game has to slow down for you, for guys to be able to apply that. And so, you know, I told them on Sunday, we have to embrace chaos, because sometimes the sideline can be chaos. And you know, again, getting back to what I said earlier, that we're going to be going hard for 3.5 hours, and we're going to be looking for you and telling you something in 15 seconds, and then expecting you to be able to go out there and apply it so that it can make a difference in the game.
All right, Coach. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks, everybody.